Hey there.
Hi, you sound better.
I feel better. I
Good.
feel better. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out how to keep. So we do this on Google Meet, and I'm trying to figure out how to keep the AI thing from
Oh,
transcribing this
God. Yeah.
because I don't trust it.
Yeah, because fuck AI.
Yeah. So, so yeah. I mean, I have the. I was thinking maybe I should start posting my podcast notes on the site. Um, just so if people have impairments,
Mm.
then all three people who listen to this, um, then we can accommodate that. But I just don't trust the AI
Yeah.
um, transcription. I just know it's going to mess up.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I am doing good. I have my distraction toys in place.
Yay!
Wanda from eating the power cable from my computer.
That would be helpful. Yes, we
Yeah.
don't. Again, the cats pose an ever-present danger of this call abruptly ending. Well, welcome to Goodnight, Mr. Holmes, a podcast about the Granada Sherlock Holmes, which ran on ITV in the UK between 1984 and 1994, and ran on Masterpiece Mystery in the US around the same time. I'm Laura.
And I'm Rachel.
And today we are looking at episode 15 in the series, which is called The Second Stain.
The story was first published in The Strand in 1904.
And then in Collier's, right, in 1905.
Yeah.
In the US. And at first glance, I was like, did we do this one already? Because, like the Naval Treaty, this is about a lost document. But The Adventure of the Second Stain was one of those as yet unwritten stories that was actually referenced in the Naval Treaty.
Was it?
Yes, which was published in 1893. So the story actually takes place 10 years before it was sent out for publication.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And that becomes relevant when we start getting into European politics.
Yeah.
So apparently the original opening to this show was very, very different. There's a Reddit post that shows that the episode began with Holmes in retirement, keeping his bees, and Watson arrives to ask for him for permission to finally publish the story because it obviously contained, official state secrets. But they had to cut that scene for time constraints. But there are these photos of Jeremy Brett decked out in Edwardian beekeeping gear. He's got this black netted hat and some kind of weird shawl, and he's wearing a pink blazer and white baggy gloves that go up to his elbow.
I bet he had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, I would think so, for sure. But in the episode that aired, we open with an older gentleman who's leaving number 10 Downing Street in a carriage, and the facade of number 10 is really quite unmistakable. It's been the same forever and ever, amen. So he's leaving, and the shades are drawn in the carriage for privacy, and another younger man is traveling with him, and Watson's voiceover says, "Two men of great public distinction would be visiting Baker Street in their private capacity and under circumstances of complete secrecy."
So Watson is going to publish an account of the case.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why, they wanted him to go and find Holmes and get his permission.
Am I right that he said that they would be visiting Baker Street at 8:30 a.m.?
Possibly.
I have that written down.
Okay. I didn't catch that, but yeah, it's entirely possible. So the older man is the Prime Minister, Lord Bellinger, who's played by Harry Andrews in one of the last roles of his life. He died 3 years later.
Oh, wow.
The younger man is the Right Honorable Trelawney Hope, who's played by Stuart Wilson, who later went on to play Julius Beaufort in Scorsese's Age of Innocence. So he was meant for greater things. And somewhere in central London, the two men leave their carriage and they get into a different one. So they're switching cars. And
Yeah, but it's still a pretty elaborate carriage, right?
Yeah. It wasn't
still going to stand out on Baker Street.
It wasn't a handsome cab. Yeah. It was an actual carriage. But at 221B, Watson and Mrs. Hudson are frantically trying to straighten up as the carriage is pulling up, and Holmes is completely ignoring everything. The men come up to 221B. One of them is carrying one of those famous red dispatch boxes that contain official documents. They still use those to this day. And the king is apparently like drowning in these boxes because they do
There's a
nothing
mental image.
by computer, apparently. So Trelawney Hope begins by saying one of the documents in his box has been stolen. And he immediately informed the prime minister, who brought him to come and see Holmes. And Holmes says, "You have informed the police." But the two men say they have not, because then word would get out to the public, and that cannot happen. And
Yeah,
Holmes,
I have to note that he discovered the loss at 8 this morning and then informed the prime minister and was told to go see Holmes. I'm like, how hard did they look if they're here at 8:30?
well, we find out actually later
But like, it was half an hour.
how hard they looked. Because it wasn't very hard.
Well, yeah, that's true.
And Holmes wants to know why it can't get out to the public. And Bellinger says, because the document in question is such immense importance that its publication might very easily, I might say, almost probably, lead to European complications of the utmost moment.
One might almost say it could lead to a world war. The first of its kind, in fact.
Exactly. No, I mean, yeah, and I'll get into this a little bit. So Watson's taking notes. He's standing behind the two men, and Holmes notices and tells him to sit down. And then Holmes asks Hope to tell him what's going on. And Hope says, as Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, which is now the Foreign Minister, I received the letter 6 days ago. It was a letter from a foreign potentate, you understand. It was such importance that I never left it in my safe, but I have taken each evening from my office back to my house in Whitehall Terrace and kept it in my bedroom, locked in my dispatch box.
Yeah, Whitehall Terrace apparently is fictional.
Yeah, it looked like Belgravia.
Yeah, presumably close to Parliament and 10 Downing.
Yep. And you're sure it was there last night, Holmes says. Quite certain. I actually opened the dispatch box whilst I was dressing for dinner, and I saw the letter inside. It then remained upon my bedside table. He said that both he and his wife are light sleepers and can attest that no one came into the room that night. And yet this morning, the paper is gone.
So it was his wife or one of the servants then.
Exactly. Holmes asked what time they had dinner. Hope says 7:30. They went to bed at 11:30 because Mrs. Hope went out to the theater after dinner. So for 4 hours, the dispatch box had lain unguarded, Holmes says.
Yeah, this is much better than keeping it in a safe in his office.
Right.
Might as well keep it in, in a bathroom.
Right.
Or a ballroom.
A bathroom with lots of other confidential documents.
Yeah. It'll never be found amongst the pile.
Trelawney Hope tells him that no one's allowed to enter their bedroom except the housemaid in the morning and the valet during the rest of the day. They are both trusty servants who have been with us for many years, and neither of them could have known there was anything more valuable than the ordinary departmental papers in my box. I mean, and frankly, if I was a servant, I just wouldn't care about the papers.
Yeah.
I wouldn't understand them,
Yeah, exactly.
They'd be boring to me.
Yeah.
Surely your wife
Which turns out to be like part of the problem here.
Yes, says Holmes. Holmes is like, your wife knew, and the prime minister bristles at this. I am convinced that in the case of this importance, it would rise superior to the most intimate domestic ties. And Hope confirms that until this morning, he said nothing to his wife. So Holmes is a little frustrated and says, who is there in England who did know the existence of this letter? And I just find it so typical of the English to say England and completely ignore the existence of Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, which at the time of the story was recovering from the potato famine and seeing many of its inhabitants fleeing to New York and Boston.
Yeah.
But no, the English don't even think about in all of England, and that's supposed to mean the world, and it is, it's Great Britain and Ireland, which is all part of the kingdom.
Yeah, but England's the only one that counts.
Right, exactly, yes. So Hope says that the cabinet was informed the day before, and while their meetings are normally in secret, the prime minister emphasized even more secrecy around the disappearance of this letter. And Hope is just incredibly angry with himself. To think that within a few hours, I myself should have lost it. And of course, Watson looks very sympathetic. Hope adds that besides the cabinet, there are 2 or 3 departmental officials who know of the letter, but no one else in England, I assure you. But abroad, Holmes asks. I believe that no one abroad has seen the letter except the man who wrote it. I am well convinced that his ministers, that the usual official channels have not been employed in this case. And the prime minister is nodding along with this. So Holmes gets to the heart of the matter. Now, sir, I must ask you more particularly what this document is and why its disappearance should have such momentous consequences. And the prime minister interjects here and says,
Let me describe the envelope instead.
The envelope is really long. It's a thin one with pale blue color. There's a seal of red wax stamped with a crouching lion. It is addressed in large, bold handwriting. Interesting and as essential as these details are, says Holmes, my inquiries must go more to the root of things. What was the letter? That is a state secret of the utmost importance, which we cannot tell you, nor do I see that it is necessary, the prime minister says.
Cool, bye.
Yeah, and basically says, if you're everything you say they are, you can find it with what we've given you. And, quote unquote, earned any reward which is within our power to bestow. Referring to a knighthood. Holmes is clearly turned off by this, but he does want to be polite. And he says, gentlemen, you are 2 of the most busy men in the country, and in my own small way, I have a good many calls upon me. I regret exceedingly that I am unable to help you in this matter, and any continuation of this interview would be a waste of time.
There is the door, sir.
Yeah, and we've seen Holmes do this before. He gets pissed when people don't answer his questions. He gets up from his chair and he walks to the window and he turns his back on them. But the prime minister's pissed right back. He and Hope also get up and go to the door while he's saying, I am not accustomed, sir, to such things. But then the PM turns around and he comes back into the apartment. Mr. Holmes, we must accept your terms. No doubt you are right. And it is unreasonable for us to expect you to act unless you have our full confidence.
We tried to run this by Mycroft, but he laughed at us and threw us out of his office.
Yeah, basically. Then I will tell you, relying entirely upon your honor and that of your colleague, Dr. Watson, says the PM, I must appeal to your patriotism also, for I cannot imagine a greater misfortune for this country than that this affair should come out. Which is funny, because Holmes at this point is about as patriotic as his furniture.
Yes.
But he likes being
to be fair, his wall is very patriotic.
He likes being trusted, and he says, you may safely trust us. It was an ego stroke.
Yes.
He responds well, too. So the men sit down again, and Watson takes out his notebook from his waistcoat, and Bellingham says, this letter, then, is from a certain foreign potentate who has been ruffled by some recent colonial developments of this country. It is written hurriedly and upon his own responsibility entirely. At the same time, it is couched in so unfortunate a manner that its publication would undoubtedly lead to the most dangerous feeling in this country. There would be such ferment, sir, that I do not hesitate to say that within a week of the publication of this letter, this country would be involved in a great war. And it is this letter which may well mean the expenditure of 1,000 million pounds and the lives of 100,000 men. Okay, so in 1893, H.H. Holmes was terrorizing people during the Chicago World's Fair.
Mm-hmm.
The future King George marries Mary of Teck, who's both German and English, as is he. There's a lot of European colonial action going on all over Africa. Just about every European monarchy was busy opposing various African countries, including Germany. Also, the Macedonians are organizing against the Ottoman Empire, which is already being called the sick man of Europe. It's 12 years till the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand, but in 1893, the foundations of the conflict are already being put into place. And judging from the way Bellingham describes this quote-unquote potentate, it seems that it is, what's his name? The German Wilhelm, who was the cousin of Prince George and also of the Tsar of Russia. The three of them look like almost identical.
They were secretly one person.
Right. But Kaiser Wilhelm hated everyone in the English family. I mean, just hated them because of reasons. And so the idea that he would write such a letter like this is not like coming out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very well within his character to do something stupid like this. He really resented his English relatives, like really resented them, even though his mother was English. And that's partly why.
Yeah, a few years ago, my family went to the World War I Museum in Kansas City. And it goes into the resentments Germany had against England.
Yep. There are all these fascinating like BBC videos about the three of them, Tsar Alexander, King George, and Kaiser Wilhelm, and the dynamics among all of them. And basically there was kind of like triangular situation where Alexander and George were really, really tight, and Wilhelm resented their relationship. Mm-hmm. But he was a crank and nobody liked him. So anyway, Trelawney Hope is feeling even more despondent, and he puts his head in his hands. And Holmes says, "Have you informed the sender?" "A cipher telegraph has been dispatched," Hope says. "Perhaps he desires publication of the letter," says Watson. "No, doctor," says Hope. "We have strong reason to believe he already understands that he has acted in an indiscreet and hot-headed manner.
We've already chastised him."
Yeah, it would be a far greater blow to him and his country than to us if this letter were to come out.
Yeah, so why keep it then? Like, why didn't you just burn the stupid? You're trying to blackmail him for something. Like, are we getting into some shady government dealings?
Yeah. And I'm quite surprised that Mycroft isn't involved at this point.
Mycroft probably is, and just nobody in this room knows it yet.
Yeah. So Watson, understandably, is quite puzzled. If this is so, in whose interest is it that the letter should come out? Why should anyone desire to steal or publish it? And then the prime minister, he's leaning on his cane, and he delivers a lecture. "There, Dr. Watson, you take me into the realms of high international politics. But if you consider the European situation, you will have no difficulty in perceiving the motive. The whole of Europe is an armed camp. Great Britain holds the scales." I mean,
like metaphor.
Yeah. "If Britain were driven into the war with one confederacy, it would assure the supremacy of the other, whether they were joined in the war or not." Yeah, a really, really extreme view of the power of Great Britain during that time. So it is the enemies of this potentate who want to secure and publish this letter so as to make a breach between his country and ours, Holmes says. "Yes, sir," says Bellingham. "And to whom would the document be sent if it fell into the wrong hands?" Watson wants to know. "To any of the great chancelleries of Europe. It probably is speeding its way thither at the present instant as fast as steam can take it," says Bellingham. Hope at this point, he inhales like sharply, and his hands are folded together almost in supplication. He is tremendously distressed at the possibilities, but the prime minister reassures him. "It is your misfortune, my dear fellow. No one can blame you. There's no precaution which
except me. I blame him. Keep it in the
I know. There's no precaution which you have neglected, except all of them."
Yes, except any precaution.
"And now, Mr. Holmes," I mean, this is the good old boy network at work, right?
Yeah.
"And now, Mr. Holmes," he continues, "you are in full possession of the facts. What course do you recommend?" "You think that if this document is not recovered, there will be war?" Holmes says. "I think it is very probable," says Bellingham. "Then, sir, prepare for war." "That is a hard saying, Mr. Holmes." "Consider the facts," he says. "It seems no doubt that this document was taken between 7:30 and 11:30 yesterday evening. So where can it be now? No one has any reason to retain it. It has been passed from hand to hand rapidly to those who need it and who will pay well for it. What chance do we have to overtake or even trace it? It is beyond our reach." And Hope looks like someone killed his wife. He's in agony. especially knowing that somehow this was all his fault, even if the prime minister is like, almost like an indulgent dad, and letting him get off the hook for this. What you say is perfectly logical, Mr. Holmes, says Bellingham. I feel the matter is indeed out of our hands. Meanwhile, Hope, we cannot ignore all our other duties on account of this one misfortune. So suddenly it's not that important.
Yeah. Okay, well, I guess there's going to be war. Bye.
We gotta go. They start to leave again, and Bellingham says, should there be any fresh developments, we will communicate with you, and no doubt you will let us know the results of your own inquiries. And they head out with Watson. Watson's assisting the prime minister with his coat because Watson is a patriot. And later we see Watson going out and buying a newspaper.
Yeah, the newsboys are calling murder in Westminster.
Yes. And then he takes the newspaper back inside, and behind him, as he's closing the door, a carriage pulls up to 221B, and a woman gets out. Watson's back up the stairs, and Holmes says, the situation is desperate but not hopeless. There are only 3 men capable of playing so bold a game: Oberstein, La Rothiere, and Eduardo Lucas. Even if we could be sure...
Or, the maid valet or wife.
Yeah, right. Even if we could be sure which one of them has taken it, it is just possible that it has not passed out of their hands. And all of these names, are a little German, a little French, possibly a little Italian, very triple alliance-y.
Yeah.
It is a question of money with these fellows, isn't it? And we have the British Treasury behind us, says Watson, super confidently. Mr. King and Country. Oh, if it's on the market, I'll buy it, says Holmes. If it means another penny on the income tax. But he's interrupted by a knock at the door, and Mrs. Hudson comes in with a calling card on a silver tray, and the name is Lady Hilda Trelawney Hope. Show her in, says Mrs. Holmes, and then we are treated to the magnificence of Patricia Hodge, who is currently playing Mrs. Pomfrey in the remake of All Creatures Great and Small. Patricia Hodge is like Eunice Stubbs in that, like, she's been in everything.
Mm-hmm.
She
looks very familiar.
If you've ever watched the show Miranda, she plays Miranda's mother, her posh mother. But yeah, right now she's in All Creatures Great and Small, having replaced Diana Rigg, who is another one of these, leading lights, because Diana Rigg unfortunately passed away. Has my husband been here, Mrs. Holmes, says Lady Hilda, and he confirms that Hope has been there. Mr. Holmes, I implore you not to tell him I came here, she says. Your ladyship puts me in a very delicate position. I beg of you to sit down and tell me what it is that you desire, but I cannot make you any unconditional promise, says Holmes. True to type.
Mm-hmm.
She does not sit down. Gentlemen,
She does take off her gloves, though, like she's planning to stay.
Yes. But she says, I will speak frankly to you in the hope that it will induce you to speak frankly in return. And she walks over to the window and she looks out like, has anyone followed her? There's complete confidence between my husband and myself on all matters except one. That one is politics. On this, his lips are sealed. He tells me nothing. Now, I am aware that there was a most deplorable occurrence in our house last night. I know a paper has disappeared, but because the matter is political, my husband refuses to take me into his complete confidence. Now, it is essential, I say, that I should thoroughly understand it. You are the only people, save these politicians, who know the true facts. At least, I presume you do. You presume correctly, Watson says, and Holmes is like, shut up.
You make a garbage spy. Stop talking.
Yeah. I beg you then to tell me exactly what has happened and what it may lead to, she says, and then finally she sits down. Tell me all, Mr. Holmes. Let no regard for my husband's interest keep you silent, for I assure you that his interest, if only he would see it, would be best served by taking me into his complete confidence. What was this paper that was stolen? She asks. And Holmes says, Madam, what you are asking is really impossible. You must see that this is so. If your husband thinks fit to keep you in the dark over this matter, is it for me, who has only just learned the true facts under the pledge of professional secrecy, to tell what he has withheld? It is not fair to ask it. It is he whom you must ask. And Lady Hilda responds, I have asked him. I come to you as a last resort, but without your telling me anything definite, you may do me a great service if you would enlighten me on one point. What is it, madam? Holmes says, almost dismissively. Is my husband's political career likely to suffer through this incident? She asks, quite understandably, given that that's her future too.
Yeah, yeah. And given the level of panic, it's like
Yes.
in half an hour.
Let me say that if it is not put right, it may have a very unfortunate effect, Holmes says.
And she's like, well, shit.
Yeah. She gets up. She starts pulling on her gloves. One more question, Mr. Holmes, she says. From an expression which my husband dropped in the shock of the disaster, I understood that terrible public consequences might arise from the loss of this document. If he said so, I cannot deny it, Holmes says. Of what nature, she asks. There again, you ask me more than I could possibly answer, Holmes says. And she gives a little, wry smile and walks to the door. Then I will waste no more of your time. I cannot blame you, Mr. Holmes, for refusing to speak more freely. And you on your side will not, I'm sure, think the worst of me, because I desire to share my husband's anxieties, even against his will. And Holmes smiles enigmatically. Once more, I beg you will say nothing of my visit, she says, and leaves, with Watson closing the door behind her. And predictably, Watson turns around and says, I say, what a really remarkable and beautiful woman.
Yeah, that's the most important takeaway here.
All right. The fair sex is your department, Watson. And Holmes's smile disappears. What did she really want? But surely her own statement was clear and her anxiety very natural, Watson protests, because women can't possibly have ulterior motives. Think of her appearance, Watson, her manner, her suppressed excitement, her restlessness, her tenacity in asking questions. Holmes says, remember, she is the youngest daughter of the Duke of Belminster and comes of a caste that does not lightly show emotion. Well, she was certainly very much moved, says Watson. And you observed, of course, how she maneuvered to have her back to the light. So Holmes disappears into his room at this point.
Yeah, so her back to the light so that they couldn't easily read her expression. And
she
I'm
did
like,
not wish us to read her expression too closely.
Yeah, it was pretty light in there. Like, I didn't have any trouble reading her.
I know. Well, I mean, just remember there's lights on top of the cameras.
They're pretty good in this show about making things look lighting wise the way they would have.
That is true. Yes. So Holmes is coming back into the sitting room with his coat on and he's carrying his hat and pipe. And Watson's like, yeah, she did choose that chair in the sort of darkness of the whole room. And yet the motives of women are so inscrutable. I mean, how could one build upon such a quicksand? Their most trivial action may mean volumes, or their most extraordinary conduct may depend on a hairpin or a curling tom, Holmes says, ignoring the fact that they are on the brink of war caused by a man who lost a letter.
Yeah. And women really aren't inscrutable. It just takes men shutting the fuck up and
Thank
listen.
you. Yes. If you'd been listening to us this whole time, maybe you would learn something.
Hey, Sherlock, why are men so fucking stupid when it comes to women?
Right. Exactly. So Holmes whisks out the door. Watson's shaking open the newspaper that he had just bought. And then, Holmes, was one of the agents you spoke of called Eduardo Lucas? Watson yells down the stairs. Yes, Holmes yells back up. Of Godolphin Street. Holmes stops in the doorway of the building, and the music at this point gets quite urgent and tense. Yes, says Holmes. You'll not see him, Watson yells down. Why not? Holmes yells back at him. Mrs. Hudson must be thrilled.
Oh my God.
Voice.
Just like, just go up the stairs, please.
He was murdered in his house last night, Watson yells. Heavens, mutters Holmes, and he runs back upstairs. He puts his hat on the rack and he pockets his pipe and he leans over Watson. Does it say murder? Murder in Westminster, Watson says. Crime of a mysterious character. Eduardo Lucas, unmarried, 34, well known in society circles on account of his charming personality. I mean, and to be fair, there were these men. I mean, Oscar Wilde was well known in society circles on account of his personality.
Well, yeah, but he was also a writer.
Yes. Yeah, but he really made his money by being
Oscar Wilde.
Yes. Valet out for the evening. They always are, says Holmes. Elderly housekeeper sleeps atop the house and heard nothing, says Watson. They never do, says Holmes. Just before midnight, Police Constable Barrett saw a door ajar, found Lucas's room in disorder. Lucas stabbed to the heart, Watson says. still reading from this newspaper with phenomenally tiny print.
Yeah.
And Holmes snatches the newspaper from Watson and dashes back inside the apartment. Now then, let me see. Prussian military dagger. Robbery does not appear to be the motive. Valuable collection untouched.
They don't say collection of what, though.
Like, no, yeah.
Collection of paintings, collection of Lego Star Wars figurines.
I was thinking rare books, but we have. What do you make of this, Watson? Well, it's an amazing coincidence, Watson responds. And Holmes throws the newspaper up in the air, and it falls down on the table.
Would have been my reaction too.
I know.
Are you
coincidence? Here is one of the 3 men we have named as possible actors in this drama, and he meets a violent end during the very hours we know the drama is enacted. The odds are enormously against it being a coincidence. The 2 events are connected, must be connected. And he bends over the newspaper on the table, which is open to the article, somehow magically. Some prop guy must have come and refolded the newspaper.
Mrs. Hudson snuck in under the camera.
Like she did in the empty house on her hand.
Yeah.
It is for us to find the connection. By now, the police know all, Watson protests. No, not at all. They only know what they've seen at Godolphin Street. They know and shall know nothing of Whitehall Terrace.
Godolphin Street is another fictional street.
It is. Yes. Yeah, there's a Godolphin Road, but it's like way on the other side of town. Only we know of both events and can trace the relation between them. It is with the late Eduardo Lucas that the solution to our problem lies, but it is a capital mistake to theorize in advance of the facts. You may stay here, my good Watson. I will join you when I'm able. And then the camera kind of zooms in on the murderous headline in the paper.
And then the next scene starts in sepia for some reason.
I think it's meant to be fog.
Is it?
London fog, which was not fog. It was smog.
Yeah. Okay.
We hear the bells of Big Ben. We see the tower of Westminster Abbey, signaling that we are back in the heart of Westminster. Police drive a carriage past, and Holmes is back in his top hat, whirling his cane around as he walks to Godolphin Street. The police have parked their carriage outside of Lucas's apartment, and they are arresting a man. Holmes is watching all of this, and then he returns to 221B as Watson himself is getting ready to go out, contrary to Holmes's request that he stay at home. But Holmes doesn't even notice this. Like, Watson, they've arrested the valet. Lestrade has been put in charge of the case. He's buzzing around like a bluebottle.
Lestrade.
I've gotten to know him rather well. Would it help if I spoke to him? Watson said. No, it would not. This is a case where the law is as dangerous to us as the criminals are. We must be patient and wait. And Holmes goes upstairs and Watson goes out.
And we watch them waiting.
Yeah. And, Watson's walking. The newsies are yelling, Lucas murder case, suspect released. So the valet's been set free. And Watson buys another newspaper and proceeds to read it on the street, which must be difficult because it's dusk. And this newspaper print could not be any tinier.
Yeah.
Honestly, they must have had like eagle's eyes back then. I just don't understand.
The larger print is pretty recent. I was looking at some mass market paperbacks that were produced in the 80s, and the print is like microscopic now to me now.
Yeah, this is why I read online or on a Kindle, because I can bump up the print, and I wear reading glasses. So but yeah,
I wear my old regular glasses for nearsightedness that I got in 2006 as my reading glasses.
Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Well, I have contacts underneath my reading glasses. But basically, I mean, you think about like the sewing by hand that people were doing and, all the close work.
By candlelight, the sewing especially really took a toll on people, seamstresses.
Yeah. I mean, you could go blind.
Yeah.
And also paper was expensive, which is why they had to have the tiny print.
They
cram as much as they could.
All the news that fits, we print.
Yes, exactly. So back at 221D, the hall clock is chiming. Holmes has managed to procure his own stack of newspapers, and he's pacing frantically in the sitting room by the fire. Mrs. Hudson comes rushing in with a cup of tea, which Holmes gulps down, and a telegram, which he reads.
And hands it back to her. Drinks it in one gulp and hands it back.
Like, here you are.
Okay.
He reads the telegram and balls it up and throws it on the floor. And the music here is also very tense and urgent.
Mm-hmm.
More time passes, more headlines, sensational development, blah, blah, blah. It's morning, and Holmes is smoking his pipe at the table while Mrs. Hudson tries to make him eat breakfast. You'll fade away at this rate, she says. And Watson comes barging in, brandishing yet another newspaper. It's getting to be the battle of the newspapers all up in here. I say, Holmes, they found the murderer, or rather the murderess. Indeed, says Holmes disinterestedly, and he's continuing to smoke his pipe and read his newspaper. There's a wire from Paris, Watson says, enormously excited. Apparently, Lucas was leading a double life. He had
a criminal / secret agent leading a double life?
Oh, no! He had a Creole wife in France where he called himself Henri Fournay. He reads from the paper. The woman was reported by the police yesterday by her servants. She is quite insane, a mania of a dangerous and permanent form. Of course, she would be Creole. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that really the stereotypes.
British.
Yeah.
Her mania was existing while not British.
Right. Yes. Well, and it also kind of hints back to, I don't know. I think of
how emotional the French are.
There's that, and
British.
yeah, and there's more of that later. But also, Creole implies that she's from Louisiana or the colonies, which also, I mean, it made me think of Jean Reese's Wide Sargasso. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, the mad attic.
Yes, exactly. Poor woman, Holmes says. But listen to this, Watson says.
Yeah, and he's like, poor woman.
Whatever. The same woman was seen in the neighborhood of Godolphin Street on the night of the murder, and later made an emotional scene at Charing Cross Station. Now, what do you think of that? Oh, my dear Watson, you are so long suffering, Holmes says. If I've told you nothing over the last few days, it is because there is nothing to tell. Even now, this report from Paris doesn't help us much. But surely it's final as regards Lucas's death.
Yeah, but that's not what we were hired to solve.
Yeah. The man's death is a mere incident, a trivial episode in comparison with our real task, which is to trace the document and save a European catastrophe. Now, if the letter is loose, no, it cannot be loose. But if it isn't loose, where can it be? Who has it? Why is it held back? Well, if Lestrade had found it among Lucas's papers, he's not such a fool as to announce it. He would inform the chief commissioner, points out Watson. The chief commissioner would then inform the Home Secretary, and he in turn the Prime Minister. No, it is not among Lucas's papers, Holmes says. But why is it held back? That is the question that beats in my brain like a hammer. Was it a mere coincidence that Lucas should meet his death on the night when the letter disappeared? Did it ever reach him? Has this mad wife of his taken it with her to Paris? If so, and why would she go back to Paris? I thought she was under arrest. Is it in her house in Paris? Shall I go to Paris? That would alert the French police. Every man's hand is against us. And
the French police are just scanning their borders, waiting to see if Sherlock Holmes comes in.
Mm-hmm. The interests at stake are colossal. Should I bring this to a successful conclusion? He goes on.
He's lit his pipe while
yes.
he's talking.
It will certainly represent the crowning glory of my career. Yes, he's lit his pipe, but that career is interrupted by the fact that he accidentally set his match down on top of the zillions of newspapers which are now currently on.
Yeah, without shaking out the flame.
So they're beating back the flames. And then we're back in Westminster, where Lestrade is buying a newspaper as Holmes and Watson pass by. Lestrade says, almost delightedly, "You are following the Lucas case." Lucas? Lucas? Ah, yes, the name does seem familiar to me, Holmes says. Eduardo Lucas. Lestrade is indignant that Holmes isn't up to speed on the case that's been dominating the news.
Yeah, he wants to brag about solving it.
Oh, yes. This is such a great scene.
Yeah.
Found murdered last Tuesday night at his house in Godolphin Street. Rather a distinguished gentleman, student of international politics, and a remarkable linguist, so they say. And his talents just pile on top of one another. I've been in charge of the case. Matter of fact.
Oh, really?
Is really puffed up. Not an easy task by any means. Some delicate problems, you understand. But to the aid of our French friends, I've been able to bring the case to a satisfactory conclusion. All the loose ends tied up. Oh, we've got it as clear as we've seen it. Congratulations, Lestrade, Watson says. Another feather in your cap. And they turn around and start to leave, but Lestrade calls after them. Oh, before you go, Mr. Holmes, it's a mere trifle, but this sort of thing you take an interest in. Queer, what you might call freakish. It has nothing to do with the main fact. Can't have, on the face of it, Lestrade says. What, then? Well, if you gentlemen could come down to Godolphin Street, I think I could explain it better on the spot, Lestrade tells him. For a few minutes, perhaps, Holmes allows.
Where are you going?
It's only just around the corner. And yes, it is only just around the corner.
Yeah, where were they going? Where were Holmes and Watson going?
Probably to Godolphin Street.
Yeah.
Because they were literally right around the corner.
Yeah.
And Holmes has been there before, observing the valet being arrested. Once in Lucas's house, Lestrade begins to take them through it. Now, the woman must have knocked on the door after she saw the valet had gone out. Surprise visit, no doubt. Lucas let her in. He couldn't keep her on the street, could he? His own wife. She was probably screaming at him, being French.
You know how those French people are.
Holmes ignores him, and Italians, and ignores him and goes into the sitting room while Watson's being polite and listening to Lestrade, saying how she traced him and reproaching him and so on. Anyway, they came in here and one thing led to another. And with the daggers being so handy, the end came soon. It didn't happen in an instant, though, for those chairs were swept over to the wall, and he had this dagger in his hand as if he tried to hold her off with it. And Holmes just picks up one of the upturned chairs and sits down on it.
Yeah.
Tell me about this trifle. Well, in crimes of this sort, we keep things in their position. Nothing has moved until Holmes puts the chair.
Right. Well, the case is solved.
Officers in charge day and night. I'm always very particular on that point, Lestrade says. And Watson butters him up. Oh, yes, you're very meticulous in your investigation. Well, this morning we thought we could tidy up a bit. Post-mortem over all
they could tidy up. I assume being a policeman in 1904 in London is like the most boring job in the world.
Right.
Tidy up the crime scene.
These days there are special
there are special cleaning services.
Yes. I've seen some, because I used to work in advertising. I've seen some of the ads and they're just like, oh my God, I can't even believe you're advertising. But of course you have to.
Yeah. We'll have to know.
It is probably the most useful piece of information you could ever have.
Yeah.
Anyway, Lestrade is saying, however, this carpet, as you can see, it's not been fastened down. It's just been laid there. And it is more like a blanket than a carpet.
Yeah. Yes.
It's very light. It's like a scarf almost.
Yeah.
Now, we had occasion to raise it, and we found, and Holmes is very impatient, yes, you'll never guess in 100 years what we did find, Mr. Holmes. Now, you see the stain?
There's a second murder in this room, and Holmes told Lestrade for not getting to the point.
Yes. A great deal of blood must have soaked through, must it not? Undoubtedly it must, says Watson. Then you'll be surprised to hear there's no stain on the woodwork to correspond, Lestrade says. No stain, but there must be, says Watson. So you would say, facts remains, there isn't. But the underside is as stained as the upper. It must have left a mark, Watson said.
Yeah, maybe, like completely move the carpet. It was probably put back in place wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And all this time Holmes is just sitting there. Now I will show you the explanation, Lestrade says. And yes, there is a second stain. Dr. Watson, will you take that side of the carpet? And Lestrade and Watson move the carpet around so the stains on the floor and the carpet match. What I want to know is, Mr. Holmes, who shifted the carpet and why? And at this, Holmes does look intrigued. He asks who was on duty the day after the murder. McPherson, he's out there now. Take my advice. Examine him carefully. Don't do it before us. We'll wait here. Tell him you know someone has been here. Press him. Tell him a full confession is his only chance of forgiveness. Do exactly as I tell you, Holmes says. And Lestrade rushes off, saying, by George, if he knows, I'll have it out of him. And as soon as the door shuts, Holmes jumps up. Watson, quick, the table. And they move the table, throw back the rug. Holmes is down on the floor by the stain, examining the parquet, looking for something. Mm-hmm. And he finds a secret compartment, but it is empty.
That's got to be really disappointing.
They throw everything back together. Lestrade is berating McPherson and dragging him inside. And Holmes sits back down and says, "McPherson, how's the family?" And Watson is seated on the table that they moved. And Lestrade makes McPherson confess, "Well, I meant no harm, sir. I'm sure the young woman came to the door answering an advertisement about typewriting. She mistook the house while you were talking, sir. You know how it is? It's a bit lonely when you're out there on duty all day." And Holmes is like, "Yeah, get to the point." "Well, sir, we got to talking about the crime. She'd read about it in the newspaper, she said, and wanted to see where it was done. So I saw no harm in letting her have a wee peek. She got just about in the door there, spotted that mark in the carpet, and down she dropped on the floor and lay for dead."
Uh-huh.
So McPherson, chivalrically, goes around the pub for brandy to revive her, but when he gets back with it, she's gone. Holmes smiles at this. "McPherson, did you move the carpet?" "No, sir, I only straightened it out. You see, she had fell on it, and polished floor being slippery." And Lestrade is just like berating the hell out of him and dismissing him. Holmes is annoyed, saying they have work to do elsewhere, and he leaves. But as
Yeah. Have you been outsmarted by another woman, Mr. Holmes? I want an anthology of nothing but stories of Holmes getting outmaneuvered by women.
Yes, yes. As he's passing McPherson outside, he shows him, like, he's got this piece of paper in his pocket that's folded, and he takes out a picture and shows McPherson. And then McPherson says, "Good Lord, Mr. Holmes." And Holmes gives this triumphant shout and walks away, and we have no idea what that was about.
Yeah.
So they walk,
a post-it note.
yeah, it is. It is. They walk past Parliament to a townhouse somewhere in Belgravia, presumably Whitehall Terrace.
Mm-hmm.
And they're coming through the gates of Parliament. I don't even know why they had to go into Parliament to begin with, because knowing how London's laid out, you would never. Why would you? Well, anyway,
Maybe they were just sightseeing.
I think it was a cinematic decision because it is a lovely shot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Lady Hilda is at a desk writing. The butler announces that Holmes and Watson are there to see her, sans appointment. She tells him to let them in, but before he can go out to get them, Holmes is already in her sitting room. "Mr. Holmes, this is surely most unfair and ungenerous on your part. I have desired, as I have explained to you, to keep my visit to you a secret, and yet you compromise me by coming here and so showing that there are business relations between us."
Or you could just be waiting for my husband.
That never occurs to her. Guilty conscience.
Yeah.
"Unfortunately, madam, I have no possible alternative," Holmes replies. "I've been commissioned to recover an immensely important document. I must ask you, therefore, to be kind enough to place it in my hands."
Could have tried that with Irene Adler.
I know, right?
Did you just give it to me, though?
"Mr. Holmes, you insult me," she says, rushing off for the bell pull. "Do not ring, Lady Hilda. If you work with me, I can arrange everything. If you work against me, I must expose you." "You're trying to frighten me," she says, not sounding very frightened. It's not very...
help.
Sorry?
She's no longer up at the bell pull trying to call for help.
Right. She comes back into the room. "It is not a very manly thing, Mr. Holmes, to come here and browbeat a woman. You say you have something to tell me. Very well. I give you 5 minutes." "One is enough, Lady Hilda. I know of your visit to Eduardo Lucas, of your giving him this letter, of your ingenious return to the room on the evening after the murder, and of the manner in which you took this letter from his hiding place under the carpet. I have kept this because I thought it might be useful." And he pulls out this paper, folded paper that he's got. And then he pulls out the thing he showed McPherson, and we see that it's a pen and ink drawing of Lady Hilda.
It's her calling card, right?
No, it's like a newspaper clipping almost
Oh, okay.
of an illustration.
Okay.
And he shows it to her and he says, "The policeman recognized you." And Lady Hilda smiles. "Once again, Mr. Holmes, I tell you, you're under some absurd illusion." She turns away from him. "Oh, I am so sorry, Lady Hilda. I have done my best, but I see I'm in vain." And Holmes goes out to the hall to the butler. "Is Mr. Trelawney Hope at home?" The butler says he'll be there at 12:30. "Then we have a quarter of an hour. We will wait here." And Holmes proceeds to go to the mantelpiece and like drums his fingers very annoyingly.
Yeah.
And Lady Hilda looks like she's going to burst wide open.
It's the finger drumming. She's like,
Yeah.
I can't take that anymore. I did it.
Oh, spare me, Mr. Holmes. Spare me. For heaven's sake, don't tell him. I love him so. I would not bring one shadow on his life. And at this, I know would break his noble heart. And she's kind of crouched down, almost on her knees at this point.
Yeah, she's almost on her knees. I appreciated that he immediately crouched down to her rather than being over her.
Exactly. Exactly. We have not an instant to lose, he says. Where is the letter? Lady Hilda goes to her desk. Here it is. I wish to heaven I'd never seen it. And the dispatch box, Holmes asks. With my husband. Wherever he goes, he takes it with him. We have only a few minutes left, Holmes says, placing the envelope inside of that folded piece of paper and putting it in his coat pocket. Now, Lady Hilda, I'm going far to screen you. In return, you will spend the time telling me frankly the real meaning of this extraordinary affair. And he gestures to her and escorts her to a chair. It was on the afternoon of that day, that terrible day, she begins, the day of Edward Lucas's murder, Watson helpfully confirmed.
I have paying attention, you see.
Right. I was just going out to pay some calls when a confidential note arrived for me. And Lady Hilda started to cry a little bit at this point. It was from Lucas asking me to visit him urgently, as he had important and private information for my ears alone. And we see Lady Hilda going to the house on Godolphin Street and going inside. He had obtained in some way a letter of mine, Mr. Holmes, an indiscreet letter, written before my marriage, foolish letter, the letter of an impulsive, loving girl. I meant no harm, and yet my husband would have thought it criminal. Had he read that letter, his confidence would have been forever destroyed. It's years.
The fact that Lucas had this letter at all makes like
I know. Shades of Charles Augustus Milverton.
yeah.
It's
Also,
years.
whoever she was writing this to, because I assume it wasn't Lucas.
No.
That guy was also a terrible person.
Yes. To sell it.
Yeah.
Or, whatever he did with it.
Or whatever.
It's years since I wrote it. I thought the whole matter was forgotten. And then, we're looking at Eduardo Lucas opening the letter saying, no doubt you remember the content very well. Very sprightly, I must say. Very sprightly. You make a charming correspondent. What do you want with me, Mr. Lucas? May I have my letter back, please? Of course you may, Lady Hilda, but it is a very valuable piece of paper. Would you not agree? I'm sure if it were laid before your husband, he would hardly fail to appreciate the contents. And he sounds, again, like Peter Lorre. These villains coming in the 80s, sounding so much like Peter Lorre in The Maltese Falcon. Like sinister.
Yeah.
You're a blackmailer, Lady Hilda gasps. A businessman, he corrects her. This is purely a business transaction on my side. I assure you, I wish no ill to you or your husband. Lady Hilda asks how much money he wants. And this is like, even more than the Charles Augustus Milverton story, this reminds me more of the Charles Augustus Magnuson story from the BBC Sherlock.
Mm-hmm.
And so Lucas says, well, the matter is an easy one. Every evening when your husband returns from his ministry, he brings with him his private dispatch box. Is that not so? Yes, she says. When he comes home tonight, this box will contain a long blue envelope sealed in red wax with a crouching lion stamped on it. Bring me that long blue envelope with its contents, and I will return you this. But my husband, she protests. No harm will come to him, I can assure you. Yeah, except a war.
Yeah.
Back in Lady Hilda's sitting room, she says, put yourself in my position. What was I supposed to do? And Watson says, well, take your husband into your confidence.
Were you not paying attention?
Right. I could not, she insists. On one side seemed certain ruin. On the other, terrible as it seemed to take my husband's paper in a matter of politics, I could not understand it. While in the matter of love and trust, it was only too clear to me. I did it, Mr. Holmes. I did it. I invented a story about going to the theater. And we see her while her husband's reading the newspaper in the dining room after dinner. She's fishing the key to the dispatch box out of his coat pocket. And she opens the box and she rifles through the papers until she finds the envelope, which is not, I must note, on top.
Yeah, I have a note about that.
And she goes back to Godolphin Street with it. And she hands Lucas the envelope. He gives her the letter back. Lucas puts the envelope in the hidey hole in the floor. And at that point, a woman bursts in, screaming in French. As Lady Hilda leaves, this woman and Lucas get into a physical fight, and she yanks a dagger from a display on the wall and slashes his face with it. And then she stabs him to death.
Which is fine. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, me too. The next morning, I realized I'd only exchanged one trouble for another, said Lady Hilda. I followed my husband to Baker Street and then came to you myself in order to understand the full enormity of the offense. I alone in the world knew where that paper was hidden. My whole mind was turned to the one thought of getting it back. What I did, and then a door opens in the hall. Here he is now, and Hope comes in asking for news. Lady Hilda kisses him in greeting, and Holmes says, I have some hopes. This is a matter of politics, my dear. We shall not be long. And Hope kisses Lady Hilda back, and she leaves. The Prime Minister is lunching with us, Hope says. May he share your hopes. So many hopes. His name is Hope. So many hopes. He has nerves of steel, and yet I know he's hardly slept since this terrible event. And Lord Bellingham walks in. What have you got to report, Mr. Holmes? Purely negative as yet. I have made inquiries at every point where it might be, and I'm sure there is no danger to be apprehended. Lord Bellingham is pissed off. That's not enough, Mr. Holmes. We cannot live on this volcano. We must have something definite. I have high hopes of getting the letters back. That's why I'm here. The more I think of it, the more I am convinced that the letter has never left this house, Holmes says. And Bellingham is frustrated at this. But why should anyone take it in order to keep it in this house? I'm not convinced that anyone is taking it, Holmes says. Hope is furious. Mr. Holmes, this joking is very ill-timed. You have my assurance it was taken. Have you examined the box carefully since last Tuesday evening? No, not thoroughly. I did not consider it necessary, says Hope. You could conceivably have overlooked the letter, Holmes says. That's impossible, says Hope. Such things do happen. You have other papers in the box? Holmes says. Yes, all my confidential papers. Hope is really exasperated.
Mm-hmm.
It could have got mixed up with them, Holmes says. It was on top, Hope says. Which
lies.
Lie. The box could have been shaken. Hope and Holmes are just like going around and around. And Bellingham says, this is easily settled. Let us go and have a look. This is a farcical waste of time, Hope says, fetching the box. Still, if nothing else will satisfy you, it shall be done. He opens the box and begins to go through the papers. The thing is not on top, clearly. And as he's going through the papers, and he's kind of talking to Bellingham as he's doing it, he's shuffling through them.
Yeah, these secure documents, and he's naming each one as he
right, with witnesses. Yes. Holmes takes out the blue envelope, still nested in that blank piece of paper, from his jacket pocket. And while Hope is going through all of these confidential documents, Holmes
he turns to Bellinger at one point, and that's when Holmes
slips the envelope into the box. And Hope is stunned. And Bellingham, I
don't remember. I just have him listed as old man.
He opens the letter. So he breaks the seal on the letter. It is intact. This is inconceivable, impossible, Mr. Holmes. Hope yells for Lady Hilda. How did you know it was here? Because I knew it was nowhere else, Holmes said. And as Holmes and Watson are gathering their hats and canes, Bellingham comes after them. Come, he says, there's more to this than meets the eye. And Holmes smiles. We too have our diplomatic secrets, he says. And the PM smiles back as Holmes and Watson are leaving. And then once outside, coming down the front steps, Holmes leaps in the air and yells, "Well, hey!" And the camera freezes on him. And again, this goes back to Jeremy Brett's bipolar diagnosis, because he was these little bits of him creep through the role, and even though they're very believable, it becomes clearer over the course of filming, according to Bending the Willow, that these kinds of interjections and jumping up and sudden movements are, in fact, more Jeremy Brett's condition than they are his portrayal of Holmes.
Okay.
But it is a joyful scene.
Yeah, it is.
So,
To be fair, I was once looking for my car keys. They were only in my, I only ever put them in my purse, and I had emptied my purse like twice and still couldn't find them. I had called a locksmith to, open the car door. He hadn't come yet. I had to call him later and say, "Oh, actually," and then as soon as I hung up with the locksmith, I look at the purse again, and there are the car keys sitting right on top.
oh my God. Yeah, once I lost my passport, turned the house upside down looking for it. Had to get a new passport, rush job. Wound up actually in, oh God, some downtown Manhattan office getting a copy of my marriage certificate because the name's on my birth certificate.
Right.
Yeah, that. Get the passport, come back from, it was a business trip to London, come back from London, this was in 2012, and drag out my work backpack, which I had not taken to London. And I'm packing it up. I unzip the front pocket, and lo and behold, there's the passport. So yeah, I mean, shit happens. We know this.
Yeah, I once spent 20 back when I was living in an apartment in the Bronx. I once spent 20 minutes frantically searching for my glasses before realizing I could see really well. Lost the glasses.
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't you once put your phone in the fridge at one point? I vaguely remember.
They were. It wasn't in the fridge. No, they were. So, listeners, occasionally I have to text Laura and say, "Hey, can you please call me? Place my phone."
Yes, that's right.
And usually it's like, it was on a bookcase shelf where I put it absently when I was holding a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
This last time it was in the garage.
Oh no.
So you had to keep calling because I was like, I know it didn't leave the house, but I just don't hear it.
I am actually losing my box cutter all the time because I'm, sticking it somewhere in the middle of opening boxes that have accrued.
Yep.
And then I can't find it for the next box. It drives me crazy. Well, any other thoughts?
I liked this one.
Yeah. I mean, anything with Patricia Hodge is delightful.
Yeah, she was a lot of fun to watch.
I love her in everything I've seen her in. And that's the other thing I like about these shows is that they bring in these actors that, I mean, I used to joke with my cousin who also loved British TV, that there were only 12 actors in England and they rotated. And, I mean, you see the crossover between Game of Thrones and BBC Sherlock and a couple other shows.
Yeah, the joke used to be, I think, Love Actually and the Harry Potter movies.
Yes, yeah. Why Liam Neeson wasn't in Harry Potter, we'll never know. But yeah, it's like you spin the dial and you come up with these actors. It's so great.
Yeah.
And
do you have anything?
No, I'm depleted. My voice is also starting to deplete.
Yeah, I can hear it in your voice.
It's starting to crack like a little boy's.
So that's all from us this week. If you've enjoyed the show and haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support us, you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Tell your friends. And join us next week when we'll be discussing the Musgrave Ritual and learn why you should pay attention in geometry class.
True. Yes. All right. We'll see you then.
Bye.
Bye.